Kareem, your host at the One Soccer Nation podcast, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing Read Ezell, the Director of Fundraising at Wefunder. You might be wondering why we've brought on Read onto the podcast. Well, Wefunder has joined forces with professional soccer clubs like Oakland Roots FC and Detroit FC to raise millions of dollars through crowdfunding. Today, we'll dive into a conversation with Read to learn more about his role at Wefunder, how more professional soccer clubs can raise capital through Wefunder, and much, much more. So Read, thank you for taking the time for joining us today. How's it going?
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk about this. I think particularly fundraisers for soccer clubs are some of the most interesting and fun raises that we host on the platform.
Absolutely. So can you provide an overview of Wefunder and its mission and explain your role as the Director of Fundraising?
Yeah. Well, essentially, Wefunder was created almost 10 years ago now in response to a law that passed called the Jobs Act. Among other things, the Jobs Act created a way for anyone to invest like an angel investor, right? Traditionally, for the 80 years prior to that, if you were a private company, you could only raise capital from what's called an accredited investor, basically a rich person, someone with a net worth over $1 million. Wefunder is a platform that takes advantage of that law change in order to make angel investing accessible to everyone. That can mean a lot of things, though, right? We are selling securities. People are investing. Those companies could be startups. They could be Main Street businesses, and in some cases, they are sports franchises like a soccer club. We're working to democratize that opportunity to invest and let everybody participate.
That's so cool. Wefunder is often described as the Robin Hood for pre-IPO startups. How does Wefunder democratize investments in startups, and what are the key benefits for everyday investors?
Yeah, well, I mean, first, what we're doing is using a law that allows anybody to invest, like I said, right? So, but that in and of itself creates actually more of a challenge than an opportunity, in the sense that then companies have to figure out how to actually recruit those investors, right? How to communicate with those investors. What the law also did is allow people to communicate to anyone about investments. So Wefunder, basically, what our core expertise is in helping people do the SEC filing that's necessary to raise money in this way. And then obviously we have an expertise in kind of helping people do this, right? There's an operational challenge there. For any group that's doing this, you need to cultivate an organic group of kind of fans, customers, investors, people that you can convert into investors. Wefunder also has its own base of investors that will kind of supplement that. But in most cases, this is going to be driven first by the organic community that a founder or an organization has built. So we're kind of advising companies on how to do that and also helping them navigate the regulatory environment.
Understood. Filing with the SEC is something that's not easy to do. Have you guys streamlined the process, and how long does it usually take?
Yeah, it varies. The biggest part, the actual filing is not that difficult to do. It's mostly that, like, you're interacting with the government, like the SEC's database, which is just like not intuitive always. And we, as the host of the offerings, right? So an entity is offering its shares in its company, shares in itself on the platform. We host those offerings. We kind of take responsibility for filtering them. So really, most of the information that goes into the filing is basic information that any business, any entity would have. But we're just kind of streamlining that interaction with the government, making sure that we do a compliance check, making sure that you are doing this, taking that kind of guesswork out of it. So yes, I guess the answer is yeah. That's a long way of saying yes. We've kind of streamlined that process. The biggest part of the SEC filing is usually getting financial statements created. That can take a couple of weeks, or if you're raising a lot of money, you have to get them audited. That can take longer. The rest of the filing is really not that complex. And so, the actual act of filing usually can be done in a week. There's oftentimes several weeks or a couple months of lead time before that. And then there's also a question about when you choose to file, and that's really a strategic question that we advise on. Sometimes people are going to do more kind of preparing the groundwork for a fundraise before they actually complete the filing, and we kind of coach people through that process.
Understood. You also mentioned that when raising through crowdfunding, that you have to have an organic following or fan base. What number do you guys usually recommend to have? Is it what number do you usually recommend to have? And do you guys also help with cultivating that audience, or do you guys just tell your startups, hey, when you guys are ready, you guys can come to us?
Yeah, I mean, it varies widely, right? Wefunder works with a variety of organizations, right? You mentioned Oakland Roots, right? Oakland Roots is an organization that has been in operation for a long time. It has a pretty existing fan base, pretty strong fan base. And so in that case, right, we were simply a tool for them to engage with their fan base in a new way. Right. And so that is a very different situation than a newer organization that is potentially using this fundraising to be as part of an initial campaign to build that audience. And so the goals of a fundraise can be very different, right? Like, we work with people that are trying to raising multiple millions of dollars. We work with people that are raising, $100,000 to really kind of take the first steps forward. And so the size of the group of customers, fans, people of interest is different. And then there's also a lot of flexibility in terms of how you are communicating the investment opportunity, right? Like, we work with some entities that are using, like I said, that are kind of using this campaign. It's ultimately a marketing campaign that you're running to raise this money to build a fan base, right? Now that's going to be you're going to have a more modest goal. It's going to take longer, but maybe you don't have that big of a following already. Now, if you want to, but in the case of Oakland Roots, right? Oakland Roots raised a couple $1 million within, maybe 48 hours of launching on the platform, right? That it was much more dynamic, right? So there's a lot of questions there. There's not a single right answer. I think our philosophy is this is a tool that every startup, every entity that is interested in selling ownership should have access to. And our experience of having done this, a couple thousand times, or in the case of soccer clubs, 10 to 20 times, is very valuable.
Understood. Yeah, I've been really watching Orange County SC closely, their raise, and what they've been doing. Super cool. They had their new owners on the pitch, so they could do those things with the tangible assets that they have. So super cool.
They've done a great job. Unfortunately, their raise is being hosted on another platform. But that's just to say, what I always say to people is, people should raise with the people and the platform that they feel most comfortable with. But I think from what I've seen, they've done a really great job of, having a stream of content and being, there's a lot of groundwork that goes into that, right? It's preparing the way, the people, getting those people that are already supporters engaged and ready to communicate. And I think when this works really well, right, you're starting with a single audience for the club, but then you're layering on top of that everyone else is following, right? And then you're going to capture part of those communities for the club. And from what I've seen, they've done a really effective job.
That's amazing. With saying that, what would you, if a startup doesn't have those type of assets, those tangible type of assets, and they don't have that type of following? Let's say they had a following of only like 300 people on all platforms, YouTube, Instagram, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
What would be the key ingredients and steps that you would advise them to take in just a jot note format with them?
Yeah, I mean, that's a challenge, right? I mean, there's one. The easiest answer would probably be, you should probably wait to raise capital in this way. But I don't think that's necessarily always the answer, right? This can be a slow burn, and there are other ways to, what I always say to people is, okay, if you don't have a bunch of customers already, what are the other communities that you have access to? What are the other tactics that you can use to collect eyeballs, right? Ultimately, fundraising is a sales operation in every instance. Um, and you're going to talk to many more people than ultimately invest, right? Even the best, even Oakland Roots, right? I think there was somewhere north of 100,000 people that they had access to reach out to. And I think maybe 6,000 invested, right? That's actually a pretty high percentage from what we see. That's pretty good engagement. But if you're starting with a small base of 300, right? Maybe there are more ways than just investment that people can help you, right? So engaging those 300 people and saying, hey, we'd love it if you invested. If you're not in a position to invest, we'd love it if you introduced us to other people, or posted this on social media, or helped us tell this story in some way, right? And that's ultimately, I think, part of the value of raising money in this way is you're able to engage those network effects, and people can help you in more ways than offering money. You know, it doesn't take much to turn someone from a passive supporter into an active booster of what you're doing. And once they're an active booster, they can help bring in more people. So what I would say is, if you are raising money in this way with that small of an audience, and you needed to do this right now, I would plan on doing this over the course of 6 to 9 months, right? And kind of incorporating this into the way that as a tool that you're going to grow your audience with.
Yeah.
Right? And at that time, you're creating a deeper relationship with those early supporters, and you're going to then go back to them and ask them to help you continue to grow.
Understood. I'm going to ask a startup question from a One Soccer Nation standpoint, and for anyone watching that has a startup.
Yeah.
We're currently raising with a safe. So would it be fine to, and we have a following of 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, so not too big at all, small but growing. And say we wanted to hop on Wefunder and do a crowdfund.
Mm-hmm.
How would that work out? Because to me, it kind of seems like a lot of work and confusing. Like we have a safe agreement. Are we doing too much documenting, and then we're going to go do a crowdfund with SEC and register and blah blah blah? Or is it simple?
Yeah, I mean, a safe agreement is, like I said, our platform is set up so that you can raise with whatever investment contract you would raise offline with, right? And actually, I think I don't have the numbers on this, but safe agreements are, at this point, probably the largest share, maybe not a majority, the largest share of the raises that we do. We actually have a templatized safe on our platform. Very basic. It's a Y Combinator safe. You kind of set the valuation cap. You set you kind of set the parameters. And basically, what that is just a typical safe that's been tweaked slightly just to make sure that it works with the investment structure that Wefunder uses. What Wefunder is doing is creating an entity, a special purpose vehicle, that entity actually invests in the issuer, the company raising, and all of the investors through Wefunder are actually investing in that entity. So there's kind of a multi-level series of contracts that governs that relationship and makes it seamless. And so actually, a safe is the fastest way to get up and running on Wefunder. You could start today. We could, over the course of our conversation, the time that we've had this conversation, I could have you launched and raising money on Wefunder through a safe. Now, you wouldn't have done the SEC filing, but you would have the terms set, the content on your page, and a place where people could go make commitments to invest, not actual official investments until you've done the filing. But it's very easy to get started with a safe agreement, actually.
Wow, that's so cool. I didn't know that. I thought it would have been a more extensive and longer process. So that's good to know. With saying that when raising with the safe, then you don't need the special purpose vehicle, correct?
Uh, yes, you still do,
Oh, is it? Okay,
because those investors are going, and that's part of the service that we provide is for
understood.
forming that special purpose vehicle. Um, so your investors are still governed by that safe, because eventually the safe agreement will convert to equity, right? And at that point, the special purpose vehicle will be purchasing shares in the entity, and it's cleaner to have kind of already established that relationship rather than do that later on. Um, in terms of your, like, if you were the one setting it up, you're not going to set up the special purpose vehicle. We do that for you. It's included in the service that we provide. It's I think that's actually kind of, you asking about how we streamline this process. It's like there's a lot of questions that you would have to discuss with your lawyer that we take care of to allow you to just kind of get down to the business of raising money.
Understood. Um, in regards to what's the short form for it? SPV, special
SPV, special purpose vehicle. Yes.
yeah. In regards to a lead investor, that would be, if I'm going based off Orange County, they have something called like Orange County something lead investor. Like, how do you guys structure it in regards to?
It's the same. You know, I think. Um, Let me see. I can look up the Orange County rates. I don't want to be distracted though in the middle of this conversation. I think their structure is the same. Now, Orange County is hosted on another platform, and I believe they typically use a different structure that's not an SPV. It's called a crowd safe. Um, I don't want to get into a sales pitch, but I think there's some advantages to using an SPV structure. It's legally a little bit cleaner and more familiar.
Could you share?
Um,
Can you share some points
um,
to that?
Say that again.
Can you share some points in regards to the benefits of
Just
it?
the SPV structure is a structure that's used by other groups of investors in traditional fundraising. So lawyers and accredited investors are going to be more familiar with an SPV. And the regulation around an SPV is clearer from the SEC. A crowd safe, there's some very technical SEC rules around the number of investors you can have in your cap table, and the regulation around a crowd safe is less the guidance around a crowd safe triggering certain rules that could affect an entity down the road, um, are a little bit less clear. But in general, the structure is going to be the same, right? We have a lead investor that is basically the syndicate lead, right? We're creating a syndicate of investors. The entity is designating that person to represent the interests of all the people investing in the entity. And so that's simplifying that relationship between the investment entity and the entity raising, right? So there's a single person kind of to interface with. Um, that person also can lend credibility and brand value to the fundraise, right? And so ideally, right, if you were a soccer club, your syndicate lead, would be David Beckham, or someone who has a track record and an audience and a reason is well regarded in the industry. But when you're talking about a soccer team, I think all this is all very much it's relevant, but a soccer team, the investment structure is more important when you're talking about an exit on the other end. And a soccer team, the investment is less about an exit, right? It's like, and I think that's actually one of the coolest things about raising for an entity like a soccer club. It really kind of highlights part of the power of what Wefunder and what equity crowdfunding does. Is it allows investors to invest based on not just a financial return, right? Hopefully the financial return is there, but you're also going to be investing because you think this is cool, because you want to be involved in soccer, right? And that this is making that accessible to people in a way that it wouldn't have been otherwise, right? Your $100 investment, your $1,000 investment doesn't necessarily need to return a 10x, or 100x return on the investment. it could offer you just a cool experience, and it might be worth it. Now, I'm not saying that those two things are separated totally, but part of this is kind of opening up that less traditional investment logic.
Absolutely, and we're definitely seeing some cool things happen with crowdfunding, or with crowdfunding. With saying that, oh man, I'm seeing a lot more clubs do crowdfunding now. Is that a trend that you're seeing?
I think it is growing, right? The first club that we worked with was back in 2019. This is before I was at Wefunder, and it was Chattanooga FC. And I think they raised almost $1 million, maybe or $900,000 from like 3,000 and change people, mostly in Chattanooga, but also around the world. And currently on Wefunder, if you include Oakland, there's probably like 5 soccer clubs live right now. It's a small baseline, but I mean, I had conversations with 2 soccer clubs last month. I think there are more. It is a very interesting way to engage an audience, a passionate fan base of any sort, right? Whether it's a tech product, whether it's a restaurant, or a chef, or a soccer club. I think this really fits into the structure of how sports fandom works. I think people are looking for ways to be involved. I just think modern fandom is kind of more multifaceted, and so this really just fits with the kind of overall trend of that. I certainly hope it continues to grow, because I think it is a really fun part of this. Maybe part of the growth of the popularity of this is also, around like Wrexham and the story of Ryan Reynolds. He really kind of brought attention to this, but I do think it is a growing growing trend. To be honest, I don't know why it's only in soccer. I haven't seen other sports franchises. Maybe it's just because of the state of football or soccer, or whatever you want to call it, and kind of the different like low-level leagues that are out there. It's kind of more accessible and more scalable for the level of capital that people are looking for. But it certainly is a growing trend, and one that we want to see grow, because it's just cool.
Yeah, it's so cool. So Reed, what are some of the challenges and obstacles that startups may encounter when using Wefunder, and how does the platform address or mitigate these challenges?
I think the biggest challenge is really just kind of shifting from what people are used to, like shifting people's mindset from being a fan to being an investor, right? I think you can't take for granted the kind of psychic distance, the journey that you have to take people on, right? I'm buying tickets to games. I'm a casual soccer fan. Now you're asking me to own a team. I think what the companies, the teams that do this very well, they come up with a really strong narrative, and they are patient in kind of communicating with an audience about how, what this means. Obviously we already kind of talked about this, but I think the biggest challenge is building that audience in the first place. Once you have that audience, you've got to kind of walk them through this process. What does owning a soccer club mean? Why are you opening up to ownership? When I'm an owner, what does that mean? What's the future of the club look like? Right? Kind of running a campaign that communicates over time all those things, right? And then ultimately, it's just a question of resilience, right? You're not going to convert every investment on the first time that people see this, right? That's just a reality of communicating information to people. People take time to absorb something. So really kind of building momentum, building a campaign and a story. The best example of this that I can think of recently is I keep saying company, There's a team called the Caledonian Braves. It's actually a fifth league Scottish team that incorporated in the United States in order to be able to raise from investors here and from kind of people with an interest in Scotland in the United States. They came up with a really strong narrative, and it's taken them 6 months, but they've raised close to $300,000, really starting from a very low baseline in terms of number of social media followers and everything. They incorporated this message about soccer ownership and what that meant into all of the content, and they kind of built that into their message across platforms, and they kind of really trusted the process. I think they'll end up raising even more than this, right? As we move to closing out the campaign, raising $300,000 means that there's probably another $150,000 kind of waiting in the wings that'll decide at the very end. So really trusting that process and coming in with a plan is very important. Just coming out and saying, "Hey, we want you to invest," kind of undersells the opportunity. It also fails to recognize the complexity of this. And so, specific strategies to do that, that varies from deal to deal based on kind of what the tools are that you have. But I really think that there's a lot more work and planning that goes into before launch. And the more that we see people do that and come up with a clear plan and clear message, the more successful they are. And then ultimately it comes down to hustle and kind of grit, right? Fundraising is very hard. You're going to be necessary part of this process is actually being told no, often by people that you think care about you many times over. And so, just that's something that's universal to the challenge of fundraising, whether it's for a nonprofit, a soccer club, a startup, right? And so just being prepared for that mentally, and that it's going to be a slow build. I think that's really, there's no magic bullet for success.
For sure. Second last question, Reed. Is there any minimum dollar amount that needs to be raised?
On Wefunder, the minimum is $50,000.
Okay.
I believe there's a similar minimum on other platforms. I'm not really sure. But if you're not able to raise $50,000 from your immediate network, what I would encourage someone to, not to say they should never raise money, but there's probably some other work that they should be doing first to kind of de-risk this endeavor, or to build an audience for it. Fundraising isn't the first thing you should do, right? I feel like in most cases you should do everything else before you have to fundraise, because the more you've done, the easier it will be to fundraise.
Yeah, I just had a question came up too. Quick one: is there any upfront cost as well with
not on Wefunder? Now, okay. To get your financials reviewed or audited, right, there's a small cost associated there, but it's possible to start raising money or raising reservations in a round before, in what the SEC calls testing the waters, before you even do that filing work. And on Wefunder, our business model is a commission on the back end, so we don't get paid until we wire you money. There are other platforms where they're going to charge you a fee to get up on the platform, but I think our pricing model is one of the reasons why it really works for soccer clubs or kind of price sensitive organizations, because before you pay us, you're going to kind of show that you're going to know that there'll be some degree of success.
Absolutely. Last question: what advice do you have for entrepreneurs looking to raise capital on Wefunder?
There's a lot. What I would say is, I think I kind of answered this before, but do the work ahead of time to know who you're going to go raise from. Right? Wefunder cannot do this work for you. We're a tool. We're a force multiplier. Have that list of names. Have the message toned down. And if you know what the first several moves you're going to make are, where the first $100,000 is going to come from, then what Wefunder can do for you becomes a lot greater. And I think really kind of spending the time ahead of time to think this through is really an important part of the process.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Reed, for getting into the details of Wefunder and what you do. How can the audience or startups raising capital get in contact with you?
Feel free to reach out. My email is read, like a book, READ, at wefunder.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. My name's pretty unique, so there aren't other Read, READ, Ezells out there. Feel free to reach out. What I always say is I'll have a first conversation with anybody. I have to protect my time at some point, but part of my job is to educate people about this and the process, and I really enjoy doing it. So feel free to reach out if you're trying to raise for a soccer club or anything else.
Absolutely. I think they'll get some good content from here. I definitely learned a lot. Reed, I really appreciate you taking the time to join me on the One Soccer Nation.
Yeah, I really appreciate you inviting me on. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to your audience.